All right. Is Mem Zion. I do apologize. I think we're going to start, maybe repeat a little bit of what we did yesterday at the end of the year, just because Mem Zion, just to stick with the flow.
Mem Zion Amud Aleph.
Mem Zion Amud Aleph. We're going to start the very last line of Mem Vav Amud Beis. So the basic theme of the parak has been this idea that money, right? When you just give money to a seller, that doesn't necessarily affect the kinyan, right? Mashicha on the item, that affects the kinyan. But money itself is not konos. Again, we're going to see the sugya going to come up today. But the very last line of Membav Amud Beis, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Huna, Mechar li be'elu. Let's say I want to buy something and I just throw some money at the seller, right? We don't count the money, right? I just give him some money, and then the seller grabs the money. Right, so in a sense, if you want to think about it, he's almost like doing a mashicha on the money. Now, traditionally, if we were trying to affect the kinyan via cash, this would not work. This would not affect the kinyan. But in this situation where I just throw the money, no one really counts the money, the seller grabs the money. The Gemara says kana v'yeshlo alav ona, and essentially what the Gemara is saying is this works not because I use cash to buy something. It's because we almost view this as a kinyan chalipin, and the item that we're using for the chalipin, the item that we're using for the kinyan sudar happens to be cash. So it's not that I'm using the cash to buy the item. I'm using cash as my chalipin. The other thing that's interesting that this Gemara is going to, point out is it says yesh lo olav ona. We know that when it comes to buying something, there's a concept of ona. The question is, if I affect a kinyan, if I buy something through the medium of kinyan sudar, is there ona or not? It sounds like from the Gemara saying that there is no ona. You can overcharge because again, a sudar isn't worth anything. So if I can get something via a sudar, clearly maybe there's no concept of ona, and we're kind of threading both things here. On the one hand, we're saying if I use cash to affect my chalipin, on the one hand, I'm kona the item because I'm doing kinyan chalipin, albeit using cash. But because I'm using cash, we're also going to have a concept of ona, and therefore, if I overcharge, the kinyan can be retracted. So again, the Gemara is going to speak all that out. Kana the buyer is kona the item, even though he didn't do a mashicha, the kavan the lo kapid kana, because clearly they weren't makbid on the value of the amount of money. It's almost like a kinyan chalipin, albeit using cash, and therefore you're kona the item, right? Kana the chalipin damu. But love ona, but the reason why there's still ona, even though we use the kinyan chalipin, is the machar li be'elu ka'amalek. Because you use the lashon of machar, of a sale, and therefore there is ona. So again, we're kind of threading both worlds. Even though you're only using cash, there's still a kinyan because it was a chalipin, albeit with cash, and there's ona because you're doing a sale. That was all Rabba in the name of Rav Huna. But Rav Abba Amar Rav Huna, Rav Abba had a different version of this. Again, the name of Rav Huna, he said machar li be'elu. If you do the same thing, you throw cash to the seller. No one's really being makbid on the amount necessarily. It's kana, but ve'ein lo lavon. He says that you're going to be. It's kona, but it's not going to be subject to the rules of ana. Meaning, it's more of a proper chalipin, the way we view chalipin. Okay. So the Gemara says, Pshita damim ve'ein makbid alehen hakamrin and zakani dechalipin damu. What we just said was that if you use cash, but you're not really makbid on the amount of cash, it's kind of like chalipin. What about the absolute reverse case? What about chalipin umakbid alehen mai? What if I do a kinyan chalipin, but it's very clear that unlike a kinyan sudar, I just sold my chametz starting matanki. I don't know the value of my chametz, but it's more than a pen. Clearly, we were not makbid on it was not a value for value exchange. What if I do chalipin, but I'm very makbid that it is a value for value exchange? Do we say that? Do we take that out of the realm of chalipin, and do we say no? It's not chalipin. Now it's mos, and it's subject to all the rules of mos. Meaning maybe there's no kinyan unless both sides do a mashiach on what they want. It's like we're doing mos, albeit with two different items. That's really the question. So again, chalipin umakbid alehen mai. So Amar V'Ada Barahava Tashma, I have a raya from this case. Haresh Aya Topes Paraso Va'omed. A guy is standing in the shuk and he's got a para. Ubachaver Va'amar Lo. What in the world are you doing over here with your para in the shuk? So the guy says, La chamar, I need tzarach. I need to buy a chamar. So I want to exchange my para for someone's chamar. The guy says, whoa, look at that. Yesh li chamar. Shiny nose in lach, right? So I happen to have a chamar and you have a para. This is great. How much is your thing worth? They start negotiating, right? Mine's worth this, yours is worth this. So then Mashach Bala Chamar es para. So the Bala Chamar doesn't have his Chamar in the shuk, right? It's the para's in the shuk. So the Bala Chamar does a Mashicha on the para, but below Hispik Bala Para Lemshuchas Chamar at Shemesa Chamar. But it turns out by the time they get back home, the Chamar is dead. Lo Kana Bala Chamar es para. We say that it does not work. So this is not a regular Chalipin, clearly. So the Gemara wants to bring a raya, Shma'amina, Chalipin, Umakbet Aleim, Lo Kana, that maybe if the two sides are haggling over the Chalipin, it's not a regular Chalipin, it's not a Kinyan Sutter, it's not a pen to buy the Chametz. If you're really negotiating the values, it's just like Mos, albeit using the form of a barter, but it's like a Kinyan Mos, and therefore both sides need to do Mashiach in order for this to work. But Amar Rava says, wait 1 second, slow down. You're right that there is this ceremonial Kinyan Sutter, but most Chalipin are a value for value exchange. We're not dealing with a bunch of fools, right? That is Kinyan Sutter, that is Kinyan Chalipin, right? Every single case of Chalipin generally involves a value for value exchange. And yet the Kinyan works when one side does the Mashicha. So what's going on over here? How come if the Chamar was dead, the Bala Chamar wouldn't have acquired the thing? So Hachamai Skinan, Rava's just going to make a major ukimta in the story. Is the Amar Le Chamar Bepara V'Tleh, the value for value wasn't Chamar for a para, it was a Chamar for a para and a Tleh, Umashach as a para, and all he did was he did Mashich on the para, because the para was what was in the shuk. But Vadayin Lamashach as a Tleh, he never did the Mashich on the Tleh, and that's why that didn't work. But again, Rava had to make some sort of ukimta, because the reality is, normally, even if it's a value for value exchange, Chalipin does not require both sides to do the Kinyan. A Kinyan Chalipin is when one person does the Mashicha, even if they're makbid on the value, that's what's going to affect the Kinyan. Okay, Amar Mar. Going back to the first thing we said, that you can do a Kinyan Chalipin on Mos. You just throw money at a seller and he takes it, you affect a Kinyan. If we recall from yesterday's daf, there was a laundry list of Amoraim that all said that you can't do Chalipin with a coin. Matbea ein nasa Chalipin. A whole list of Amoraim. So the Gemara is going to ask, is this a raya that Rav Huna holds that you can do Chalipin with Mos? So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Machar li be'elu kana, v'yesh lo labona, lema savar Rav Huna matbea nasa Chalipin. Again, we had a whole list of Amoraim that all said ein matbea nasa Chalipin. So are we going to say that Rav Huna is really arguing with all these people? Gemara says, lo, Rav Huna savalak Rav Yochanan, and that's not what's going on over here. Rav Huna holds like Rav Yochanan, the Amar Dvar Torah Ma'os Konos, who says that on a Dioraisa level, you can affect a Kinyan just by paying money. So then why do the Rabbanan say that even though you've paid the money, you still need to do a Mashiach? It's a Gzeira, Shema Yomru, Nizrifu Chatecha Ba'aliyah. There's a Gzeira that we don't want the Mocher to be able to basically, even though the Lokeach hasn't taken possession, we want the Mocher to still be concerned for the property in case there's an ones. We're actually going to see this case later in the Gemara today, and therefore the Rabbanan were misakein that you need to do a Mashiach, albeit even though you paid. But the point is, Milsa de Shchicha Gazer Rabbanan. The Rabbanan are only going to be gozer that you need to do a Mashiach on top of the payment of money. That's by something that's Shchiach. But a Milsa lo Shchicha lo Gazer Rabbanan, something that's not Shchiach, they were not gozer, and therefore just bringing it back home. In the case where we started at the top, where a guy throws money at a seller, that's not a case that's Shchiach apparently, and therefore we fall back to the regular position of Devar Torah, Mos, Arakonos, and that's what affects the Kinyan. We started the daf by saying it's probably Chalipin. The Gemara is saying, no, it wasn't Chalipin. That was just Ma'os or Konos. I thought you said Mos are not Konos. Mos are not Konos midrabanan. But in this case, we would fall back on the Dioraisa because it's a milsot of below Shchicha, and that's why the person is Kona. Okay. Amar Leimar Huna Bereid Rav Nachman L'Rav Ashi. He said basically the same thing. Atun Hachum Asu.
So that's the reason why the other guy didn't need Mashiach?
Exactly. So Atun Hachim Masni Sule, but Anan, our version was very similar. Hachim Masni Minale, B'chein Amar Rabun. Like I said yesterday, there was a whole laundry list of Amoraim that all said Ein Mapeh Nasa Chalipin, and he said in our version of this we said B'chein Amar Ravuna Ein Mapeh Nasa Chalipin, and that's why again, and the reason why the Kinyan worked, like Eddie just said, is because of Dvar Torah Ma'os Konos. Now, I just actually made a joke to Rabbi Matanki when I was selling my chametz, and I totally butchered the joke based on this next sugya. So, by Mek Konan, again, by a regular Kinyan Sutter, one person, right, I'm selling Yigal real estate, and the method of Kinyan is going to be Kinyan Sutter. The question the Gemara is going to deal with right now is, whose suitor is it? Am I giving Yigal a suitor, or is Yigal giving me a suitor? That's going to be the question. Bamet Conan, how do we affect this kinyan? Rav Amar, the Caleb Shel Conan. Rav says it's the Caleb of the Kona. Yigal, who's the Kona, he's buying my real estate. He is going to give me a pen. Yigal saying, I want to buy something from Levi. I'm going to give Levi my pen. Levi is going to pick up the pen. And I shouldn't have said Levi, because Levi's the other Amor in this thing. So it's going to get a little confusing. But the point is, Yigal saying, I'm going to give my pen to the seller. The seller is going to pick up the pen, and that's going to affect this whole kinyan. The Levi Amar, Levi's the other Amor right here. He says, the Caleb Shal Makna, Kedabin Lamemer Lakaman. Levi says it's the Caleb of the Makna. The seller is going to take the pen, give it to Yigal, and that is going to affect the kinyan, like we're about to discuss. Amalei Rav Huna b'diskarta l'Rava. So Rav Huna b'diskarta said to Rava, Ula Levi to Amar b'Caleb Shal Makna. According to the Amora Levi, who said that the seller is the one that gives the suitor to Yigal, Hakakani Ara Agav Glima, and in Cain. We'll just speak it out outside first. We know there's a concept of kinyan agav. If a person buys real estate, when you make a kona on the real estate, when you make a kinyan on the real estate, you can also acquire metaltalin. It clearly does not work in the reverse, right? You can't acquire metaltalin and agav, the metaltalin, acquire the real estate. But if you're telling me that the way our kinyan works, me and Yigal, is that I give Yigal a pen, and by Yigal picking up the pen, he's now kona the real estate, that's backwards, right? So what you're telling me is that Yigal, by acquiring the pen, is acquiring the real estate. It shouldn't go like that. It's the other way around. Yigal should be acquiring real estate, and Agav, the real estate, he gets the pen. No one's ever heard of such a thing where kinyan Agav works by being kona the metaltalin and Agav the metaltalin, you're kona the real estate. So let's just read it inside. If you tell me that we're dealing with the Caleb of the Makna, Hakakani Ara Agav Galima, you'd be acquiring land, Agav the Glima, Agav the suitor. Im Cain, Havle Nechasim Sheish Lema price, the nickname in Nechasim She'en Lema price. We know that that's backward. It's Nechasim She'en Lema price, nickname Nechasim Sheish Lema price. So Amar Lei, so Rabba said back, he said, Ihava Levi Hacha, if Levi was here, have a mapik la'apach pulsi denure. Sparks would be flying out of his face. He'd be so upset at what you're saying right now. Because mi svaras glima maknele. Do you really think that what's affecting this kinyan between me and Yigal is me giving over a pen and by him acquiring the pen? That's what's acquiring the real estate? Of course not. It's much more of a relationship thing. It's like from the hana that I'm getting, that you're even transacting with me. That is what is affecting this kinyan. Whatever the lumdus of kinyan chalipin is probably above the scope of that's the way of saying it. I just don't understand it. But the point is, it's not. You shouldn't think that it's Yigal's being acquiring a pen and therefore acquiring. It's not that. It's a different. Chalipin is just a whole different ball game at all. But the bottom line is we have a machlokas when you do a kinyan suitor. Is it the caleb of the kona or is it the caleb of the makna? The Gemara says kitanai. This is actually a subject of a machlokas ta'anaim. What's the source of kinyan chalipin? So it's the story of Boaz in Rus, right? So the pasuk says v'zos. Is it lefanim or lefanim? Lefanim. V'zos lefanim b'Yisrael ala geula v'ala temur lekaim kol davar shalaf ishnalo v'nasan lirei. So Boaz, right, wanted to buy the land from the Goel, and one of them took the shoe off and gave it to the other. And the question, there's a fairly machlokas in the story. Who gave the shoe to who? Whose shoe was it? So the Gemara is going to go through it now. So the word geula in the pasuk is zumechira, saying that even when there's a mechira, this is a form of kinyan. Nechenu omer lo yigael. There's a pasuk by Karbanos, by I think it's Tushas Bechar, I think, of not selling it, but the Torah uses the word yigael for a sale. Temura zu chalipin. When the pasuk in Rus says temura, it's referring to kinyan chalipin. Nechenu omer lo yachlifenu v'lo yamir oso. That's talking about temura. Lekayim called davar shalaf ishnalav v'nasan l're'eu mi nasan lami. This is the question. So Boaz, Nasan, Lagoel. Boaz took off his shoe, gave it to the goal. Boaz was the Kona. He used his shoe and he gave it to the goal. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Goel, Nasan LaBoaz. Rabbi Yehuda argues. He says, no, it was the other way around. It was the Goel who was being, the Makna, he was giving the shoe to Boaz. So we're going to leave it to Melchul Kastanaim of, again, who I butchered it because I said to Rabbi Mateki, gave me a pen. I said, oh, I guess it's the Caleb Shlomakna, not realizing he was the Kona and I was the Makna. So I butchered this joke. Well, I was like, oh, it's today's daf. What are you going to do? Anyway, Tana. Conan is another machlokas that we saw that kind of permeated the previous few blocks. Tana, Konen bekli, when you do chalipin, you need to use a kli, and you can use a kli, even though the kli itself is not worth the shava pruta. So again, I'm taking use the pen, but you can easily use a yarmulke, you can use a sutter, you can use something that is not worth the shava pruta. But Amar Rav Nachman, lo shanu ela bekli, but you do need to use a kli. You cannot use a fruit. It needs to be a kli. Pasuk talked about a shoe. It needs to be something that can't be a fruit. Rav Sheshes Amar Pilu Beperos. Rav Sheshes disagrees. Now you can even use a fruit. My time at Rav Nachman. We spoke it out, but Amar Kra, na'alo in immediately no. You need to use something. You need to use a kli, a shoe, whatever it is. My time at Rav Sheshes Amar Kra, l'kaim kol davar. The pasuk says kol davar, even including fruit. So Rav Nachman Ami Chsiv l'kaim kol davar. What does Rav Nachman do with the words kol davar? Ahu l'kaim kol davar de niknin b'minah. Rav Nachman says you're right. Everything can be acquired via kinyan sutter, but chalipin must be done with a kli. Rav Sheshes Nami Chsiv na'alo. What does Rav Sheshes do? The pasuk clearly refers to a na'al, a shoe. So I'm Rav Sheshes ma na'al davar hamasuyim af kol davar hamasuyim lafuke chetzi rimon chetzi ekos. All the pasuk is saying is you can use anything you want. It just has to be a davar hamasuyim. It can't be half an apple. That you can't do. But you can use an apple. Okay. Amar Rav Sheshes bereds Rav Evi. So it's kind of fascinating, getting a little glimpse into how they would do kinyans. So they would use kinyan chalipin. That was apparently a very common form of transaction back in the day. But even with the transaction, you will sometimes have the lawyers have to draft up a document. So the document would say on this and this day they did, chalipin. And I guess the way chalipin was described was, the Gemara says, the star would say, B'mana de kasher lemikneve. That's how they would describe chalipin, with these four words. B'mana de kasher lemikneve. So the Gemara works through each word. B'mana, why would the star say B'mana? It's lafukim midrab sheishes, damar kinyan, di'inin, ka'amar konin, beperos, right? But the fact that you're saying it was done with a mana is like Rav Nachman, not like Rav Sheshes, who says that chalipin requires a mana, and you can't just do it with the fruits. Dik kasher, why? What's the word dik kasher come to do? Lafukim min Shmuel, the Amar Konin bemeruka. He says that chalipin requires something that's kosher. Lafuke Shmuel, who says you can even do chalipin with seems like some nasty thing, something with cow dung or something like that. But the point is, the shtar would say that you need to do chalipin with something kosher, lafuke, that thing. Lemikna, what's the word lemikna? Lafuke, midalevi, from the fact that lemikni means to acquire, that sounds like we're taking sides in this discussion of do we use kelev shel kona or kelev shel makna, and it sounds like we use the kelev of the kona, right? To amar bekelev shel, lafuke midalevi, amar bekelev shel makna, kamash mulan, lemikna, it's you do chalipin to acquire below leknuye, and not to affect an acquisition. So it's kelev shel kona and not kelev shel makna. And bay, what's this fourth word? What does that mean? Papa amar lamute mafbeya, as we've seen many, many times, that chalipin cannot be done with coins. That you can't use isurei hana, so you can't use avodazar, I don't know, whatever your isurei hana is, you can't use that to affect a chalipin. There's another version of this. Bay, the last word bay, amar papa lamute matbeya, and dekasher, and the word dekasher is amar azviv beis maravashi lamute asar isurei hana. And what do you do about this morika? So they would say aval morika lo itzrich. We don't even need a word in the shtar to teach me that I can't use cow dung to affect the chalipin. We wouldn't even need that. Okay, moving on. The Mishnah said asimon konas hamatpea. In all the list of things with the Mishnah, right? Basically, we were saying that there's currency and there's a product. Which one is the product? Which one is the currency? So the Mishnah said that when it comes to an asimon, these tokens, when you do a mashiach on asimon, that creates the chiyuv of the person to have to owe you the money. So my asimon, what is an asimon? We just translated it as a token, but what's an asimon? So amarav mos hanitonos besimin lebeis hamirchas. It's some sort of token that I guess, again, this must have been very common back in the day. You go to the Beis HaMirchatz, they need to know how many people are coming that day, so they need to prepare the towels and the water and this and that. So you have to give them a token at some point in the day, and that's how they would know how many people are coming. So it was a token that had some value because this was your entry, your ticket to entry into the bathhouse, right? So may say, Ein mechal and meister sheni al asimon. You cannot do pidyon meister sheni. You can't be mechal the meister sheni onto an asimon. below almos anitonos basim and lebeis hamerchatz. And the Mishnah says, you also, is it a Mishnah? Yes. You also can't be mechalal meiser sheni onto the token that you use for the base Americas. But meklal, the asimon, lav, mos, anitonos, pasim, the base Americas. It sounds like these are not the same thing. The Mishnah talks about an asimon, and the Mishnah talks about the token for the base Americas. So v'chitema, the Gemara says, maybe you can tell me prushikam afarei, or sometimes the Gemara will do that. You'll have something in a Mishnah, and you'll say, no, it's not redundant. The second line is just explaining the first line. But the problem is, the Gemara says you can't say that over here. V'holo tana hachi, because we have another Mishnah that says the same thing by our brisa. It says mechalal and meiser sheni ala simon divrei Reb Dosa. Reb Dosa says that you can be mechalal meiser sheni onto an asimon. But chachamim omrim ein mechalin. But b'shavin shei mechalan maos hanitonos b'simin lebeis hamirchas. We have another Mishnah that again is very clear that an asimon is not the same thing as this token for the beis hamirchas. So elamai. So again, going back to our question, what is the asimon? If it's not this thing that you use to go to the beis hamirchas, what is an asimon? So Elam Rav Yochanan, my asimon, pulsa. It's some sort of unminted coin. Va'az Rav Yochanan is tamei. The Amar Rav Yochanan, Rav Dosa, Rav Yishmael, Amru Davar Echad. Rav Yochanan said that Rav Dosa and Rav Yishmael both agreed on one point. They both said the same thing. Rav Dosa had the Amr. Rav Dosa was this halacha that we just said that you can be mechal mos meiser sheni on asimon. Rabbi Yishmael, Ma'i, what's Rabbi Yishmael? The Tani, Vitzar, Dakasat Biyadcha. In the context of Meiser Sheni, you bundle up money and bring it in your hand. The Rabbos called Davar on Nitzvah Biyad, Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says that includes anything that you have in your hand. Rabbi Akiva Amar, the Rabbos called Davar Sheyesh Lav Tura. Rabbi Akiva disagrees and he says you can only be Mechal Meiser Sheni on currency that has a tsura. Rabbi Yishmael disagrees, says you don't even need a tsura. That must mean that Rabbi Yishmael and Rav Dosa say the same thing, that you can be mechalel mos meiser sheni on an asimon, which again is this pulsa, it's this unminted coin. Okay. Ketzad mashach emenu paros payros below nasan lamos ein yachol achzerbo. And this is really the ikar line of the Mishnah, which is this idea that when you're buying something, it's not the ma'os that are affecting the kinyan, it's the mashlicha that's affecting the kinyan and creating ischayvus on the buyer to pay the seller the money. And now we've seen this, we've hinted at this sugya so many times, and we're about to start, a really ikar sugya, the machlokas Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish about Ma'os Konos. So Amar Rav Yochanan, Devar Torah, Ma'os Konos. We know, and the Mishnah was very clear, that Ma'os are not Konos. By paying money alone, you are not affecting the kinyan. But Rav Yochanan says, a chiddush, that's not the case on a biblical level. On a biblical level, ma'os are konos. So why is it that we still require mashicha if ma'os were already konos? Because the bottom line is what we don't want a mocher to sell all of his grain to the lokeach. The lokeach still needs a few days to get a truck to get all the grain. In the meantime, we have a fire at the Ari Crown building, whatever it is, right? We've got a fire, and therefore the mocher is no longer incentivized to call the fire department because he's like, listen, I got paid. It's not my issue. It's the lokeach's issue. We don't want that. Therefore, we tell the mocher until the lokeach is able to take possession of the stuff, it's still on your watch, and therefore you got to call the fire department and maintain your insurance. The Gemara says, I don't even understand. So man deshadet deleka by Yishlumi. The mocher is not going to be responsible. Whoever set the fire is going to be responsible, right? So like, why do we even care? Why are we making the mocher hang on to the stuff? Let whoever set the fire, who'll pay back the lokeach. The Gemara says, well, the Gemara says something very similar. The Gemara says, Alexander, a people like a bonus. Okay, fine. It wasn't an arsonist. It was an onus, right? It was an electrical fire, whatever it is. The point is, there's going to be a fire. No one's going to be responsible. If the mocher is on the hook, he's going to make sure that he's going to do what he can to save the fire. But again, what's the bottom line? That on a diraisa level, by paying for something, that is affecting the kinyan. That's all you had to do. The mocher can no longer retract. But because of this gzeira, we say that the lokeach needs to do a mashicha in order to affect the kinyan. Reish Lakish argues. Reish Lakish says mashicha mufaresh min haTorah. Even on a diraisa level, ma'os are not konos. You need to do a mashicha in order to affect the kinyan. My time is Reish Lakish. What's the reason of Reish Lakish? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says this is in the context of the isser of ona. it's clear that it's okana miyad amizach. You make a kinyan from the hand of your person. It's davar hanikna miyad liyad. The only way to affect a kinyan is by transferring something miyad liyad. The item, the thing that you're selling, needs to go from the mocher to the lokach. Cash alone doesn't do it. So Rav Yochanan Omar miyad lemute karka lespe ona. What does Rav Yochanan do with the pasuk? Rav Yochanan says simply, he says, listen, that's a pasuk that's dealing with ona. We know there's a halacha that ona does not apply to karka, right? Why doesn't ona apply to karka? Pashas, because the value of karka is in the eye of the beholder. There's no such thing as shtus, right? There is only one like kind of that parcel. So it's whatever the mocher and the lokach are going to agree to. Rav Yochanan says, how do I learn that? Because the pasuk in ona says clearly miyad liyad, only something that can be handed, miyad liyad, only metaltalin is subject to the halacha of ona. Karka is just not subject to the halacha of ona. So that's what he does with the pasuk. Rish Lakish will respond, Im kain lichtov kra v'chisim kru memkar miyada misecha al tonu. Why do we need the words in the pasuk of O Kana? Clearly, those words are saying that a kinyan, metaltalin, needs to happen via Meshicha, not through money. Shma mina le Meshicha. But Rav Yochanan says, so Rav Yochanan, O Kana my avidle, bayale lechetanya, he'll say it's needed for this other brisa. It says, V'chisim kru memkar al tonu, ein li ella shenisana lokeach. If I only had those words, I would think that the only time ona ever applies is where the lokeach is being ripped off. Where the seller, who's obviously probably he has much better command of the various facts here, he's ripping off the lokech. That's where we have an issue of odah. Nisana mocher minayin. How do I know that if the mocher just did a bad deal, he's also subject to the halachas of ona, Talmud Lomar, okana al tonu. Rish Lakish tarti kamer min. Rish Lakish will tell you that I just learned both from the thing. Let's just do a little bit more. Tanan, Rav Shimon Omer. Kol sha kesef bi yado ala el yona. He says that the mocher, whoever's holding the cash, his yad is ala el yona. So mocher who the motzi hadar, lokeach lo motzi hadar, and therefore the mocher who has the money, he's always able to retract on the sale. The lokeach is not able to retract on the sale. Let's just speak it out outside. What the logic over here is? The logic is that again, this is really going to be the Gemara's raya to Rav Yochanan, not Rish Lakish. The svara over here is that we want the mocher to have skin in the game, right? Because we want him to ultimately, if there's a fire, worry about it. So we tell the mocher like this: you just sold all of your grain. If the price goes up in value, you have the right to retract. So you're still kind of an owner here. Why do we want him to do that? Because if there's a fire, we want him to take responsibility. We want him to run after it. So the point is, the Gemara says like this: if you want to tell me that on a dioraisa level, mo's are konos, but it's only on a derabanan level that we kind of keep the mocher on the hook. The entire purpose of the gzeira is dafka to keep the mocher involved, not the lokach, and that's why we say that it's the mocher. His yad is al yona. We don't want the lokach to be able to retract. We just want the mocher to be able to retract to keep the mocher keeping his insurance up, right? But if you're telling me that even on a dioraisa level, mo's are not konos, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. If the mocher can be able to retract, why can't the lokech retract? So Amar Rish Lakish will say, Aliba de Rav Shimon lo kamina. You're right. There's no question that when it comes to Rav Shimon's halacha, right? Rav Shimon clearly holds that mo's are konos on a dioraisa level. I was just talking about the derabanan, right? Ki kamina, Aliba de Rabbanan. So me and Rav Yochanan, our machlokas is Aliba de Rabbanan. Aliba de Rav Shimon, of course, he says mo is konos, and that's why only the mocher can retract and not the lokech. So one last Gemara, Bishlam al Rish Lakish, Hanudika bein Rav Shimon the Rabbanan. If you hold like Rish Lakish, now I can understand the machlokas of Shimon and the Rabbanan. That's proof of the machlokas. Rav Shimon says that on a dioraisa level, mo's are konos. The Rabbanan say that on a dioraisa level, mo's are not konos, and that's their machlokas. El Rav Yochanan, ma'ika bein Rav Shimon le Rav the Rabbanan, he'll just say that the difference between them is this halacha of Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda, gederach shetiknu meshicha b'mochrin, kach tiknu meshicha be'lekuchos. Essentially, that the same way that if price fluctuates, the mocher can back out. Rav Chizda says that the lokach can also back out, which again is another reason to keep the mocher interested, because the mocher knows that even though we went through the sale, if the price goes down in value, the lokach is going to retract. And therefore, I need to keep my insurance up until the lokech comes and finalizes the sale. So Rav Shimon, less later Rav Chizda. Rav Shimon doesn't hold to this halacha. Rabbanan is luder Rav Chizda, and that is the machlokas. Rabbanan and Rav Shimon will stop here. Shkayach, everyone.
Shkayach.